bringing service to life.
She's here. This hat is a gift. Thank you very much to Kathy in New York City, Captain McHale. So I'm going to take this hat off right now. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should leave it on to honor her. But David, why don't you go ahead and do the smart stuff? I did make a real short radio show ad, and I did get your letter in it. And your Kelly letter 249 is underneath the DSTM of the Queen of England. And no offense to England, and of course Denise is English or British. She's my wife, and I love her a great deal. But it seems to me that England and the monarchy has never really let the United States go, and I think they're going to let it go now. And I got some stuff I want to talk about Paul Ryan, but why don't you take over, because I'm eating my chef salad right now. David, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I believe it was Napoleon said that his best generals were the lucky ones.
Yeah, because their phone rings right when they're trying to talk.
Right. His best generals were the lucky ones, and lucky, and you as a fighter pilot would know that. You're only lucky when you can recognize and exploit an opportunity when it occurs.
Yep.
And to recognize and exploit an opportunity, you've got to do a lot of hard work. So the only really lucky people at our level,
yep,
and for that matter, Napoleon general's level, they've done hours and hours or years of work to recognize vulnerability of the enemy, right? And when you see the enemy's vulnerability, you pounce. So fortunately, with your background and your relationship with your sister and in the Air Force and so on, and my background, more perhaps theoretical, but I've been in some pretty hot spots and reacted reasonably wisely, I believe, is I've never seen an opportunity like this for an organization like Able Danger, and I don't think it's an opportunity for any other organization, whether you want to call yourself or ourselves a counterintelligence organization, it's really irrelevant. We're the only show in town, Phil.
Well, I agree, and I just wish that we'd be getting some support out of Washington, D.C. But did you have a chance to see the email that I got from a fellow I'd never heard of until today down in New Zealand?
I don't think so, because I've been racing like you.
Yeah, okay. Well, go ahead and you say some smart stuff, and I'll be here eating my salad if you need me.
Okay. Well, I coined a phrase for you and for the chat room that I think it might be interesting. Do we have a president, or do you have a president in the United States who's a trigger-happy Twitter man or a Twitter-happy trigger man? And there's a big difference. Obviously, Trump has fairly active fingers that at present he's using on his Twitter machine to send out what I would describe as chaff. And because of my relationship with you, I think I can recognize chaff when it's being generated in huge amounts by laconic fighter pilots, right?
I'm glad to hear you. I'm not kissing your ass, but I'm glad to hear you see it my way, because Donald Trump is outsmarting all these people.
Well, I pray so, and I hope so, because there's a big difference from the Marine Corps generals around him, because they are paid, I would argue, to know the difference between a trigger-happy Twitter man and a Twitter-happy trigger man, because obviously, if he's conscious of what he's doing with his Twitter account, then the prayer would be that he's actually destabilizing the opposition or the enemy.
I think he is.
And I would like to agree with you, except maybe and I think you and I both understand that from different points of view, you never want to underestimate your enemies, and you never want to overestimate your friends. No, nothing personal, right?
Yep.
Now, what he's up against is hundreds of years, not of the Queen, but of British intelligence,
yep,
which built the world's most powerful mercantile empire, that if he thinks, or anyone else thinks, has gone out of existence is sadly mistaken. We, if I put my British hat on, we have agents that have been in place for hundreds of years all around the world, including the Levant Company, for example, of the 16th century, which would be operated in the area that is now called Syria.
Okay.
So we have generations of local families that have connections with the British mercantile empire based out of the city of London, which I can assure you, Phil, the Queen doesn't have a clue about. And most British people don't have a clue about. Now, the question is, what arm of the American intelligence community should have a great clue about? There's only one, I think, and it's the Marine Corps intelligence activity.
Okay.
Have you ever had any interactions with the Marine Corps intelligence activity in their different manifestations around the world, Phil? Over to you.
Nope, none whatsoever. But the Marines are always well, I was going to say the tip of the spear. Well, they're not always the tip of the spear. Sometimes it's the SEALs, sometimes it's the Army Rangers. But as a service, the Marines are the ones that are the quickest to be deployed, simply because they don't need to get a bunch of people in Congress or Senate to go along with them. By the way, you're familiar with Paul Ryan claiming publicly that he is not going to run for re-election, right? You've heard that gibberish?
Yes.
Okay, that's not true. I truly believe that Paul Ryan had a little meeting with one of the Marine generals, and I believe it was General Dunford, and General Dunford probably told Ryan in no uncertain terms, you're not welcome in Washington, D.C., and you're not welcome in running the government. The Speaker of the House typically has been somebody like Denny Hastert that's really predictable because the people have the dirt on him. So why should Paul Ryan be any different? There's some dirt on him, but I think the Marine generals in white hats, and that's, here I sit wearing a white hat. I'm going to take it off because I really thank you, Captain McHale, for this wonderful gift, and I'll treasure it always. But I don't want to try to live up to it because doing what I've done and what you've done for the last 11 and a half years, it's a constant grind. And I had a rather discouraging phone call early this morning, and I'm still trying to get over that, and I'm not sure I will. But I'm sure I've got my normal hat back on now, my USS America hat. I don't know if you've seen the YouTube that Denise sent me. She was up, and I don't know why she was up in the middle of the night. I've talked to her twice today, but I haven't asked her. But I think that wives and mothers can somehow instinctively know when their child or their husband is dealing with perhaps as much as that person could possibly deal with. And she sent me a YouTube, and I didn't put it in the radio show ad today. So what I'll do, I meant to, is when I turn it over to you, I'm going to go get the YouTube and put it in the chat room, because somebody somewhere, in fact, that's what Denise said on the email I got last night. It was about 8:30 my time, which would be about 2:30 over there in London. She said, looks like somebody's been listening to Abel Danger. They put out, I think it's about 20 minutes, and it makes the claim that SES and Serco are the two mechanisms which have abused the United States of America and held us hostage to, you can say, the Queen, the Crown agents. The bottom line is, some entity is controlling the United States, and I don't know what my future holds, but I think that I will live long enough to see the bonds broken. And I know that back around 1930, it was called the War Department then. It wasn't the Department of Defense. They came up with War Plan Red. They were coming up with military proposals to go against any country in the world that might be our enemy. And back then in 1930, they identified the United Kingdom as being a potential enemy. I think they were absolutely right. And I try not to get frustrated with the slow actions of these three Marine generals. and President Trump. In fact, I'm gonna make a bullet statement, then I'm gonna shut up. I think since September of 2015 at the latest, uh, Obama was no longer running the United States of America. He was acting like it because who knows what in the world our country would do if they found out that the military had assumed control of our country. I believe it has. I think there's been a soft coup. I think that the Marine generals and other Army generals and admirals, I think they said enough is too much with Hillary, and had she gotten in, the military would have been slaughtered, uh, which is the whole point. Somebody wants the United States to get into World War III, and I don't think Trump's going to go there. I don't think the Marine generals are going to go there, and now I'm going to try to get out of this and be quiet, but I don't think Syria is the target. I think that's a sideshow. If you held me down and forced me to say, well, if Trump is not agitated at Syria, but yet all of this confusing Twitter storm indicates that, is there somebody he's upset with? I think that perhaps that's Turkey. Have you ever heard that, David, anywhere?
No, Field, and I don't think it's true.
Okay, well, that's good. You go on and do the smart stuff, and I'm going to sit here and listen.
Well, in a military briefing, I understand, I think from my brother and from you, that a proper briefing, anyone who's in the briefing can raise their hand and make an interjection, because the briefing officer has his first duty to make sure that everyone understands what the content and objective of the briefing is. But as I understand it, a briefing is about telling people what you're going to do, what they're going to do, explaining why they're going to do it, and then telling them what you just said. Is that a pretty fair assessment?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So now I'm going to give what may pass as a military briefing, although it's not really a military briefing, it's a we the people briefing.
Okay.
Right? So I'm just going to tell you what the objective of this exercise is, which is that we strip out, and this is the advice to Kelly, the objective is to strip Serco, which you got earlier on in this conversation, and Con Air and the senior executive service out of any contracts with the United States, and transferring the keys to Boeing's encryption for asymmetric data links from Serco bankers and shareholders to President Donald Trump and the Marine Corps intelligence activities. So if I was giving we the people, you, the people in the chat room and so on, my view of what the objectives are in the short term, the medium term, and the long term, is to strip Serco, Con Air, and the senior executive service out of any contracts with the United States. And the reason for Con Air, Field, I think it's really interesting. How many prisoners, pedophiles, members of other criminal groups, do you think that your sister has transported since she launched Con Air in 1994? Over to you.
Well, probably all of them that exist, wouldn't she?
Quite probably, which may be in excess of 1 million.
Okay.
Now, when these prisoners are processed through Christine Marcy's jails, right, when Christine Marcy apparently developed a prisoner medical services program, which might have meant that she could administer or have administered psychotropic drugs to said prisoners, she would have effectively created a global network, because prisoners come out of jail, right, of potential zombies that can or have been filmed doing something to their fellow prisoners or to a child or their spouses or someone out there in the big wide world during a horror flick like out at the pig farm, where they would rather die than be exposed for what they've done. And also they can have what I think are technically known as homicidal ideation effects of the drugs. That is to say, they'll go out and kill people. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I do, but I'm just, I got to ask somebody. There's something going on here in the chat room about Lance. Could somebody, David, I'm not disregarding you, I'm going to give it right back to you, but would somebody bring me up to date on what the issue with Lance is? I'm suspecting, David, that um, we may have lost one of our compatriots. Over to you. And that, you know, I'm way behind. So if anybody can just, I'm down at the bottom of the chat room. If anybody could tell me which Lance we are talking about and what the issue is with Lance. I was just at a funeral yesterday. I had Lance. Oh, yeah, this guy that I met last year at. I'm not sure if I met him at. Yeah, he was at. Anyway, he, this guy that I know over in England has died.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just continued. Sometimes you wonder how much any one person is supposed to take, and I'm sort of feeling that way right now. David, over to you.
Okay, well, all that's left for me to do is be optimistic, Field, and focused. So I'm sorry about Lance's passing, but I think we're now facing a tipping point in global relations, which could, if that Twitter finger turns into a trigger finger, usher in World War III. So time is of the essence, and I would invite people to focus on this particular issue. So let's look at what Con Air represents. If I was a strategist thinking about overthrowing the United States government, whether that would be on 9/11, and replacing it with an insurrection made up of key components of Serco, Con Air, and the senior executive service. Well, as far as Con Air is concerned, that gives me access to probably in excess of 1 million people, at least, who have been more or less processed through the prison system by your sister and her assistants in the prisoners medical services program. So all I would need really to identify those prisoners who might be usefully relied upon to participate in the 9/11 attack and the overthrow of the United States government is a web-based facility to track those prisoners and calibrate and rank them in terms of their ability to kill with enthusiasm or lie with enthusiasm about the attack. I just need a bit of money. Well, I can get that through the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund. And I need some useful technology to put my SWAT teams together. So I'm hazarding a guess. Your sister, using Con Air and its United Kingdom equivalent, which would be Serco, flew a SWAT team into New York on 9/11, comprising around 40 technicians who knew their way around Otis elevators. You know where I'm going with that?
I am, but I'm trying to deal with some other things too. You said Otis elevators, so you're talking about 9/11 and the fact that the elevator equipment rooms, roughly on the 74th floor, had some other moderations or modifications made to them prior to 9/11. And do you remember who was in charge of security of World Trade 1 and 2 at that time?
I think it was John O'Neill.
I thought it was one of the Bush guys.
Yeah, no, the problem, if we separate out the nominal leaders, maybe who are raising the fog and the finance, that might be Bush, one of the Bush brothers,
Yeah.
or sons, or whatever it is. But from a technical point of view, John O'Neill would have been qualified to intercept and preempt and thwart the demolition of the buildings simply because of his background. I believe John O'Neill was flown out to investigate the Khobar Towers bombing.
Okay.
And he had smoke blown up his ass by the Saudis.
Okay.
And Americans should remember that the Saudi Arabia government is a shareholder in Serco, and therefore would have sent representatives to the meeting on the 47th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11 to hear what Christopher Hyman said.
Okay.
Right? So John O'Neill happened to die. He was murdered in the World Trade Center, and that's just one whistleblower that's gone west, or if that's the right word, but the kind of people that you would need around to track the John O'Neills of the world and the possible thwarting of the plot to overthrow the government would be the kind of people that your sister had been flying around the world and across interstate since at least 1994 and probably back to December 1988. Remember why December 1988 seems to be a seminal year in her career in dispatching or deploying prisoners? Over to you.
Did you say Seminole?
Yes, I did.
Well, she doesn't have much use for semen, but I presume you meant in another manner of speaking. Yeah, in December of '88, she called me up and basically I told her how to drone airplanes so her federal prisoners could be safely transported from Hawaii to the mainland because there's no federal prisons in Hawaii. So anybody that went through the federal court system would have to be accommodated at prisons in the U.S. So I gave her the intellectual property, if you will. Now, did I teach her about how to, or did I tell her basically how to drone airplanes? Yes, I did. Does that mean I own the information? No, it doesn't. It's all information should be public. But I am the one that relayed the information to her, and she and Hillary and some others, used it against the United States of America on 9/11. So if somebody ever forced me to try to get sort of caustic or sound resentful, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to let somebody dictate the rules of the game to me like that. But just to practice going there, if I were going to express any frustration with three of the Marine generals or President Trump, and I'm going against my own advice to you, David, which is President Trump can't keep all 7 billion people in the world happy, so he's sure not going to keep me or you happy. Having said that, yeah, I would ask President Trump this. If I told you in writing that my sister, Christine Marcy, was the person that needed to be dealt with on July 29th of 2015, why is it that we don't know for a fact that she's been dealt with, as in incarcerated? And you could do it, she could be incarcerated for her own protection, because Hillary Clinton appears to have a real appetite for killing people that are potentially witnesses against her. And my sister probably is positioned to be one of the greatest finger pointers at Hillary of anybody that I know of. David, I'll put you on the spot. Do you think there's anyone that knows more about what Hillary's done than my own sister?
No.
I don't either, so I'll turn it over to you. And did you ask me a question? Did I put you off? I didn't mean to. But
No. You're in good shape, Field. And just to reiterate, so if I'm briefing or you're briefing President Trump and the generals,
yep,
on the idea of we're going to tell them what they need to do, we're going to explain why they need to do it, and then we're going to remind them what we've said. I think that's pretty clear, right?
Yes, I agree with what you just said, and I understand it.
Telling them what they should be doing,
yep,
is they should strip Serco, Conair, and the senior executive service out of any contract with the United States government, and do it now.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
Because that will behead the beast, if you will, because Serco cannot deploy a significant number of criminal or pedophile-based SWAT teams without the use of Conair. That's the transportation mechanism.
Okay.
And Conair would have flown, or planes rented or leased by Conair, would have flown the elevator technicians into New York, probably for completion of the upgrade to the high-speed, quote, aggressive elevators that would go from the ground floor to the very top in a few minutes, or 1 minute, or something like that. There are about 6 of them in each tower.
Yep.
And I believe those elevator technicians, I think it was Ace Elevators of Palisades, New Jersey, or New York, or I think it was New Jersey. They were allegedly the people who stood by while innocents suffered in those elevators and they were trapped. They didn't let them out. And then they ran like cockroaches. And as far as I can trace them, I think they flew back to the United Kingdom.
Yes, I
Oh,
remember
that's
you
good.
saying that before. And didn't they leave New York, New Jersey area and go somewhere south, like the Carolinas, before they went to the UK? Or am I forgetting something?
I think I heard they went to Delaware.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
All right,
Yep,
which is where you can register these bizarre companies, you know, like the Virginia London Company or whatever it is.
yep,
Um, so, from a Marine Corps general point of view, it's fairly easy. We've identified the guys who would have been in a position to place the explosive slash insulator material inside the elevator shafts so that they could serve as incendiary devices to produce the high energy gases and overpressure that sent 10-ton girders flying out of the top of the Twin Towers and embedding themselves in buildings 100 meters away. And I think I pointed that out to you, and it really doesn't need pointing out to anyone with common sense. That's not what gravity does,
yes. You've
right?
pointed it out many times, and I think that people that have been listening to Able Danger for a while all understand that. So continue.
Right. And so if I use that analogy, because as you know, my pet hobby horse is symbolic or deductive logic, if we apply that to the JFK crime scene, if the fatal bullet which killed John F. Kennedy blew a 6 square inch fragment of skull out of the back of his head, then it didn't come from behind. It came from the front,
Yes.
right? So that excludes Lee Harvey Oswald in the book depository as the final marksman. He might have been able to squeeze off one or two shots that killed, I think, that hit Kennedy in the shoulder, but he wasn't the one that blew the back of Kennedy's head off, right?
Okay.
And then let's take Captain Gerald DeConto, the duty officer of the U.S. Navy Command Center on the morning of 9/11 in the Pentagon. Now, again, not being a military general, I would say, well, that's probably the number one strategic target I would want to take out if I stood or would expected to stand any conceivable chance of overthrowing the government of the United States with force on 9/11. And the Brits are not stupid, so they'd say, well, how do we take care of Captain Gerald DeConto and his buddies, and at the same time create the impression that a Boeing 757 flown by your former classmate hit the Pentagon and killed him? So they know that a 757 can't execute a trajectory, but let me just back up. So whatever weapons platform killed Captain Gerald DeConto on the morning of 9/11 in the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center and blew a circular hole in the inner courtyard wall of the Pentagon, pushing, I would guess, about 1.5 tons of debris into that courtyard, then it wasn't a Boeing 757. Do you think you can agree with that, Phil?
I was just sneaking out to go to the other side because I'm a little cold and I'm going to go turn the heat up. What was your question again? Make it real simple. I think I know. You basically are talking about the damage done to Wedge 1, and you're saying that it wasn't done by a 757. Am I correct?
Almost, but not quite, because the deductive logic statement would be whatever weapons platform
Yep.
killed Captain Gerald DeConto, which means we don't have to worry what it was, but
Yep.
we're interested in what it wasn't, right?
Yep.
And in logic, that's described as a conjunction, and blew a hole, a circular diameter hole, I think 12 to 14 feet in diameter in the inner courtyard of the Pentagon, right, with a 1.5 tons of debris pushed into the inner courtyard, then it wasn't a Boeing 757 hitting the outside of the building.
Yes, I agree.
So this is the Sherlock Holmes stuff, the quote that I love. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote the stories, put them in the mouth of the great detective, fictional detective Sherlock Holmes, who said that once we have excluded the impossible, the improbable, no matter how unlikely, is true. So I think that we're not exactly repositioning, perhaps refocus is a better word. Able Danger is in a position now to help the public, the lay public, use their common sense and exclude the impossible.
Okay.
And that's a major step forward in crime scene investigation. And it's based on the idea that the first thing you have to do at a crime scene is establish the weapon that was used, not the motive, not whether it's the Jesuits, the Illuminati, the Jews, the Queen, etc., etc. That's just fluff, right? It's chaff.
Yep.
You have to establish the weapon, and you, as a fighter pilot, you've used some quite interesting weapons, and you are capable of improvising a weapon. So, for example, if you don't have your skinny missiles to shoot up the tailpipe of some enemy, but you're tagging a plane that's heading for the White House or the Capitol building, then you told me that the average, well, no, I don't know whether it's an average fighter pilot, could just fly into some of the ailerons or tail of a plane and knock the tail off. Basically, it would crash way before hitting the high-value target in Washington. Is that correct?
Yes. In fact, there's so much BS we deal with all the time, but there's a member of the Washington, D.C. Air National Guard. On the morning of 9/11, they had F-16s there at the D.C. Air National Guard. But they're ground attack airplanes, but they're still F-16s, and they can be loaded with missiles, but they didn't. Two of them got airborne, and if you don't think this was a pre-planned dog and pony show, the squadron commander was in one of the two F-16s, and a female pilot was in the other one, and everybody was trying to make her into some kind of hero or heroine. But anyway, the answer to your question is, yeah, if you're in a fighter aircraft and you're going up against airliners, the airliners typically are flown by people that don't have a clue as to what the capabilities of the fighter that's pursuing them has, and if they see the fighter, most airline pilots are not, they do not understand what a radar missile looks like, what a heat-seeking missile looks like. They can't see if you have any cannon rounds, for your internal gun, and all these fighters today have internal guns. That's because during Vietnam, some of the fighters didn't have guns, and when they got into close-range air combat maneuvering, if they weren't in missile parameters, they didn't have anything to shoot down the MiGs with. So then the entire military production of the fighters that followed the Vietnam-era fighters, even during Vietnam, they came up with an enhanced F-4 called an F-4E that had an internal gun. But the point is, it would be child's play in a fighter, whether it's an F-16 or an F-4 or F-15, or when we had F-14s or now F-18s and the F-35. By the way, David, did you see that just today or yesterday, the Air Force has stopped accepting F-35s from Lockheed Martin? Did you see that?
Nope.
Yeah, that's good. We don't need worthless weapons that cost a whole lot of money. We need weapons that work. Now, your question that got me on this never-ending answer, so I'll shut up and go turn the heat up here in a minute. But a fighter pilot, if you have to, it's called a last-ditch maneuver. But if you run out of everything else, you can always collide with the target aircraft, which you need to be mentally prepared to do that, because you're not going to die. The target aircraft is, and when I used to be training for this type of stuff, I always figured I'd just go for the vertical stabilizer, which is the tall, pointy thing at the back of the airplane that goes straight up, because you knock that off, and it's possible to stay airborne, but not with the skill set and the experience of the average airline pilot. And I don't mean to say that well, first of all, I'm not a pilot anymore. And I was, I had a lot of motivation and a lot of commitment, and I was very mission oriented, and I would not need missiles or guns to destroy an airliner, but you can only take down one airliner at a time by ramming them. So it's, if there's, 30 airliners out there, you can only ram one. So it is a tactic, but it's not a tactic that's going to be used against a large number of aircraft. But the beauty is the fighter pilots know what the airliners are made of, and the airline crews don't have any clue as to what's in the cockpit of that fighter that just pulled up on their left wing. So I'll leave it at that. But yes, you can certainly destroy an airliner without missiles or guns. You can just fly into its tail. That's a weak part, and it's also you have to be. I hope someone will please put up a picture of a B-52 flying after its tail, its vertical stabilizer got knocked off by turbulence in 1964, and yet that B-52 flew with no vertical stabilizer because the crew, they happened to be test pilots, but they had some pretty good skills. And I'll leave it at that because I got to go turn my heat up because I'm running on empty and I've just eaten a little bit finally. So, David, give me 3 minutes and I'll be right back. But I hope I answered your question. Yeah, you can knock down
Yeah,
an airliner with a fighter. Over to you.
yeah, exactly. Of course, if you can see it or you're sent in the right direction. So two jet fighters would have aborted or neutralized those two aircraft that allegedly hit the north and the south towers on 911, and the enterprise to overthrow the government of the United States would be finished. So therefore, they needed to divert the aircraft and send them in the wrong direction, so they couldn't or wouldn't eyeball the weapons platforms to determine or recognize the switch. So, for example, the switch might be where the on-scene commander aircraft, perhaps a Bombardier C-406 or whatever it's called, would be tethered electronically to the decoy in the drone aircraft, the decoy being a large Boeing civilian aircraft, and the drone being perhaps a missile-carrying low-level fighter bomber, dropping a penetrator weapon that could go through the building and pop out the other side. So obviously, the planners of 911 understood that they had a number of roles for their SWAT teams to play, including the script for the exercise, which of course was laid out for Amalgam Virgo 1st and 2nd of June of 2001, and Global Guardian September the 10th to the 12th, right through to spoliation of the crime scenes. Now, I've been talking about Con Air, so let's assume that your sister had a database of all of the people that she'd transported and put in prison cells since 1988, after that conversation she had with you, and she could sort those prisoners into those that might be homicidally ideated with the administration of a few psychotropic drugs, to the more gentle and innocuous prisoners who maybe have been arrested for peddling a bit of marijuana. And the beauty of it is, once she's got these people under control, she can actually upgrade or downgrade people. So if she wants to create a pool of homicidally ideated pedophiles that would know if their crimes were exposed to their fellow prisoners, they would be killed in jail in a not very nice way, maybe removal of genitalia and stuffing it in their mouths, which is why a hood up in BC was killed. Anyway, it would be fairly traumatic for prisoners who are locked up for peddling marijuana to fall into the company of such characters. All I'm saying is basically your sister, I would say, would have access to 1 million hoods or former hoods that are out there that have special skills, and she would be able to recruit, I would think, a team with a little bit of advice, because she's as dumb as a bag of hammers, a little bit of advice for how do you put a demolition team into the World Trade Center buildings before 911, so that when the decoy event, such as a weapons platform hitting the outside of the building, had been triggered, then subsequently you could bring the whole buildings down with a rocket-fueled reaction that drove 10-ton girders into adjacent buildings 100 meters away. So she has an incredible resource. Now, the thing that disturbs me, actually it's amazed me, I've just connected the inventor of what is known as a prisoner tracking and warning system and corresponding methods. That's US 605 4928A, with the early technologies associated with video cassette and camcorders. And it's an American, and his name is Jerome Jerry Hal Lemelson, who must be one of the most prolific inventors in United States patent history, patent law. Do you know how many patents have been attributed to this guy? He's dead now, Field. Over to you.
Oh, 3,527.
No, 605.
That was my second guess, 605.
Yes, I knew it was latent and laconic, but 605 patents is a lot of patents. Now, I'm the inventor of the deductive computing machine, and I filed a patent application in Europe in 1988. And I can tell you, unless this guy is totally remarkable, every patent that you put forward, subject to a few modifications as you learn as you do, requires a huge amount of blood, sweat, and tears and money. So this guy is a scam. He's a scam artist. Now, inventing elements of the video cassette recorder and the camcorder, let's say around the 1970s period, means that he would have been in a position to identify what was necessary to film your sister being mendenhalled by Nicholas Soames. Can you just remind the audience what being mendenhalled by Christopher Soames might feel like, Field? I mean, you'll have to use your imagination, but I know you've got one.
You said Christopher Soames. That's not what you meant.
I meant Nicholas Soames.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone in the chat room understands fully what being mendenhalled means. Hang on. David, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think there's a fire warning. So not in this building, but I got to be gone for 30 seconds. Over to you, David.
Okay, while Phil's putting out the fires, I hope they're not digital fires where the instructors of the Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton are Serco. Let me just read what that means, that you've got this British company, which I think is a criminal organization, whose investment banker is none other than N.M. Rothschild and Sons Limited, which curiously enough is the investment banker for the Crown or the Queen and the investment banker for Donald Trump. That's quite an extraordinary combination, because the investment banker for the Queen, Donald Trump, and Serco would be an extraordinary position to manipulate, corrupt, and extort said Queen, Donald Trump, and Serco. So let's see what digital fires instructors do at Serco. Well, they teach the Marine Corps base Camp Pendleton trainees in California how to use information derived from all military disciplines, e.g. aviation, ground combat, command and control, combat service support, intelligence, and opposing forces, to determine changes in enemy capabilities, vulnerabilities, and probable courses of action. So what Americans should ask themselves is, who is deemed to be or seen to be the enemies of Serco and its investment banker N.M. Rothschild and its shareholders, which include the government of Saudi Arabia and 10 global custodian banks, including BNY Mellon, and 2 intellectually elite, if that's the right word, pension funds by the name of TIAA, Teachers Insurance Annuity Association, and its equivalent in the United Kingdom, the University Superannuation Scheme. I would say that their enemies are the friends of we the people. And these are bent on a depopulation agenda, I suppose following the mantra of the Fabian Society, which talks about centralized credit, government by an elite, and depopulation. So Americans should look back into the origins of the Fabian Society, and they might find to their horror that the modern academic implementation or protagonist for the Fabian Society is the London School of Economics, which I find correct that George Soros went to the London School of Economics, and so did John F. Kennedy. And again, you've got this British opportunity, which they exploit to entrap George Soros, to entrap JFK in an encounter with someone young enough to make the encounter illegal, and then blackmail them So the fact that this Mr. Lemerson invented elements of the video cassette recorder and the camcorder and the prisoner tracking and warning system and corresponding methods, and that's defaulted to his wife. I think his wife is still alive. He died in 1997. But I think in the last year of his life, he was awarded 40 patents. Now, that's bullshit. Right? There is no way an individual could develop, refine, write up, and be granted 40 patents in the final years of his life. I don't know how healthy he was. And I just look at myself. Some people are kind enough to say I'm fairly bright. If I accept that, then I accept it with good grace. But a fairly bright person who can just manage one substantial patent in a career that's now over 50 years, and I compare myself with this guy, Hal Lemerson, I think the guy Lemerson was a fraud, and he was manipulating the patent office. Now, how was he manipulating the patent? I don't know. But let's take another guy, and I'll read the second paragraph of today's post. McConnell claims that the Soames brothers used the likes of J.R. Ray Detling of Saratoga, California, as a proxy inventor for various Churchill toy shop devices. Well, if you Google J. Ray Detling, you'll find he's associated with the bombing program or campaign known as the Unabomb, because the bombers' targets were the university people and airlines. Unabomb, University Airline Bomber. And apparently this guy Detling was using patents derived from UTC, Universal, or I think that's Universal Technology Corporation, one of whose subsidiary companies is Otis Elevators. So Ted Kaczynski gets hammered for being a Unabomber, but the general argument I think that we can make is Kaczynski was a patsy. Now, what happened to Kaczynski? Well, when he was put in jail, he was put in a cell with some interesting neighbors. Byfield's sister, Christine Marcy. On one side, there was a Ramsey Youssef, and the other was a Timothy McVeigh. Can you tell people very quickly about Ramsey Youssef, Field, if you're back?
Yeah, I'm here. Ramsey Youssef, he got taken into custody eventually over in Lahore, Pakistan. I think it was Lahore. A friend of mine who was a federal law enforcement officer of some stripe claims that he actually put the cuffs on the guy. Is that true? I believe it to be true. Can I prove it? No. But Ramsey Youssef had been involved in the pachinko prop. I think it was called pachinko. Somebody in the chat room will know. But there was a plan to destroy simultaneously, or at least on the same day and within hours, destroyed 10 747s over the mid-Pacific. And whether it was going to be 7 Uniteds and 3 Northwest or 3 Uniteds and 7 Northwest, it doesn't really matter. The two target airlines that were going to lose airplanes if Ramsey Youssef's bombing compatriots had done their deal. David, I'm going to have to go again. But anyway, I'll be right back to finish that. I just got to check on fire engines.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So just reading the second paragraph, McConnell claims that the Soames brothers used the likes of J. Ray Detling of Saratoga, California, heavily involved in the Unabomber operation, and the late Jerry Hal Lemelson, who, amongst his 605 patents, invented the Conair tracking system and elements of Sex and Lies video cassette recorders as proxy inventors for various Churchill's toy shop devices registered with Northern Trust, where the alien property custodian in Chicago, incidentally, Northern Trust was the alien property custodian in World War I and World War II, and is a shareholder of Serco. therefore would have had a representative on the 47th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11, where the alien property custodian in Chicago allegedly allowed Serco agents to create some reality show targets for President Trump, with Boeing Company's encryption for asymmetric data links, allegedly developed by Serco and the former Boeing Phantom Works director, Dr. Pamela Drew, to conceal attacks in Syria with, for example, the United States Secretary of the Army's binary chemical warhead. So what you've got in the United States now, you've got three entities that are bent on the overthrow of the United States government. You've got Serco, which is a private company quoted on the stock market, with 10 global custodians as shareholders and $80 trillion of assets under management, three governments as shareholders, including the United Kingdom government, the Saudi Arabian government, and the Singaporean government, and the two, I would argue, radical faculty teachers pension funds, namely TIAA, Teachers Insurance Annuity Association, which would be paying, maybe they're not doing it yet, but will be paying benefits to two couples representing the greatest traitors in the history of the United States of America, one being Bill and Hillary Clinton, and two being Barack and Michelle Obama. That's pretty staggering. So British intelligence has planted in the Oval Office a series of traitors who have access to the Churchill's toy shop since World War II. Now, what was the Churchill's toy shop? Well, they were a particularly brilliant and capable team of technicians, about 250 in number at their peak, that designed special weapons for special weapons and tactics teams. I don't know if that was the terminology then. So a couple of systems that would be of interest, I guess, to today's Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton, being trained by Serco, would be, and Field can perhaps, if he comes back, can tell me that.
I'm here.
Well, all right. Do the Marine Corps divers use limpet mines, do you think, Field? Over to you.
Well, I don't know what that is. How do you spell it?
A limpet mine is, it's got a magnetic thing and it attaches it to the hull of a ship to be destroyed, and the frogman swims away and it blows up the ship. Very effective.
Okay.
And so my question to you was, do you have frogmen in the Marine Corps?
Frogman is an antiquated term, and they use, well, Jesse Ventura was a frogman, if you want. No, frogmen are underwater demolitions teams, and you know they've morphed into SEALs, but they're special forces in the Marine Corps too, and they might be called Marine Recon. I don't know. You know, things change over time, and what used to be a convention in 1977 might be completely different now. But you can rest assured that the Marine Corps has everything they need to just. And I see a good picture put up by Braveheart right now of someone attaching a magnetic shape to the outer the hull of a ship. And maybe you see it, David. I don't know if you do or you don't.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, but that's good. And you know how sometimes I like to be unpredictable?
You're always unpredictable, Phil.
I know it. And that frustrates some people. And, you know, I can't make everybody happy. There's only, and I don't want to sound disrespectful to you, David, but as far as my ability to make people happy, I can't make very many people happy. I just would like to try to make my children happy and my grandchildren happy and my wife, of course, more than either of the other two, happy. But I think that perhaps it's time for Donald Trump and his Marines to figure out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And, you know, I don't think it's a logical or academic reach to say that you and I are good guys, and maybe it's getting close to being past time where Donald Trump and the Marine generals that he's working with, engage us. I think they should. I think that we've done a lot more good for the United States of America than the sum total of all the intelligence services, which I believe there's 18 different intelligence functions, and they're all competing for budget dollars. That's what they do, and we don't have a budget. We've got the truth, and I just hope at some point the truth will be recognized, and those who have fought this battle for a long time might somehow be given a pat on the back or a handshake, and I'm not going to wait around for it. It may never come, but I'll tell you something, and I got to make sure if the certain person's in the chat room, and I'll know. I'm going to the M's. Yes, the person's there. There's a person who published a picture, and I think it's already been in today's radio show. I mean, the chat log here at Campfire. I think it's already appeared once. Maybe it'll appear again. There was a picture taken of Trump and a bunch of his military staff, and I don't know if General Kelly was missing from that picture or if he was on the other side of Trump, away from Mattis and Dunford. But that's a statement of fact. I do not know, but I think that picture will come up again. And for the people that are familiar with that picture, if they have a pretty good understanding of what that indicates. In fact, here comes a picture right now. I see Dunford. And this is not the picture I'm talking about. There's a picture, I think it's probably in the Oval Office, where Trump is in the center and then a bunch of very high-ranking military people are surrounding him. I saw today that someone here in the Campfire chat has had they raised some questions about General Kelly. I don't know neither does anybody else. I mean, nobody can be sure until the person admits in no uncertain terms, exactly who they're serving. But there's people in Trump's inner circle that are certainly working against him in the country. And we've seen a couple of those guys go. Rex Tillerson went, his doctor went. And I'm happy to say that we, or me, depending on if we get a blindfold and a cigarette before they kill us, but I know I for sure raised the issue of that surgeon that was the medical doctor, his Navy admiral that was hanging around with Trump, went over to Switzerland with him recently. The deep state really doesn't want Trump to succeed, and the whole world really needs Trump to succeed. Now, at the end of this administration, will it have been Donald Trump that was actually the president? Oh, there's the picture, Braveheart. Thank you very much. And I don't think I can make it bigger, but if somebody can take a look at that picture and tell me where Kelly is, and I can do it with green uniforms, because green uniforms are Marines, and I think I only see two. I only see two Marine Corps uniforms, and so I would say that it looks like General Dunford is to the right of President Trump. If somebody can blow that up and tell me if there's any other Marines, it looks like the 1/3 from the left might be a Marine, but you would think that all three of his generals would be in that picture if the picture was sending a message that we should all understand or be encouraged by. But I don't know that, and I do know that there is someone in the chat room right now who, then I'm going to give a number, 7564. The person in the chat room that understands 7564 will probably send me an email in the next 3 or 4 minutes and tell me the significance of this picture. David, if I get that briefing from someone who knows more than me about this, I'll certainly let you know when the time when the time comes. And David, we also need to look at these two American flags and see if there's gold fringe on them. I don't know if there is or there isn't, but over to you, David.
Okay, so I'm going to need a minute, Field, and I've just put a picture of some of the dinky toys associated with the anti-tank missiles developed in the Churchill's toy shop. So we talked about the limpet mine, which was invented in the Churchill's toy shop, and there was a particularly efficient, which I understand the Canadian forces really appreciated as the only hand or arm or personal carried weapon that would take out some of those tanks that the Germans had. So now a lot of this work was also done sort of out of sight. I believe the Churchill's toy shop worked on the nuclear weapon for the Manhattan Project and chemical and biological. So for all intents and purposes, no one had a monopoly, but there was a very effective operation, some people call them skunk works, reporting direct to Winston Churchill during World War II, that mastered a number of weapons in the categories of chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive weapons. So when that operation was shut down by the Ministry of Supply at the end of end of World War II, of course, you had some very capable people, a lot of them in the United States, who had worked on the Manhattan Project, which of course was used in the attack on Nagasaki and Hiroshima during the latter days of the World War II. So the great problem for the world is, where are those people and where is their knowledge and who's licensed to use it? Well, back to the reason why I think we can take a position that the Marine Corps generals have got to get off their butts, if you will, take their head out of where the sun doesn't shine. And I'm not being unkind to Marine Corps generals. They would outrank me, I guess, unless I was a member of the Senior Executive Service. And if I understand that correctly, Phil, members of the Senior Executive Service, led by your sister, either rank equally to or equivalent to or outrank Marine Corps generals. That doesn't seem to be very wise, and I need a 1-minute break, Phil. Over to you.
Yeah, you take your 1-minute break, and I see there I'm getting a lot of support from the chat room. And I noticed that somebody named Braveheart, who it points out that there's 9 on one side and 11 on the other, so maybe that's intentional. And James L. says Kelly wouldn't be in uniform. I don't think Kelly's in that picture. Okay, Mary says she doesn't see Kelly. And so Ryan W. said this picture is from today. I thought it was yesterday or the day before even. Field went to Trump's Twitter and got a better image. Kelly is not in the picture. Thank you very much, NTTM. I'm not, first of all, I have more questions than I have answers. Hanging Chad says Kelly has been relegated to taking the picture. I think he's kidding. Hit the link, it will be bigger. Okay, let me just try that. Hit the, oh, bingo. Now I can see it. Thank you very much, Griff. Yes, I see Dunford there. And I got a question about Admiral McRaven. If anybody that is listening right now has a pretty good opinion on Admiral McRaven, I'd sure like a private email from you. In other words, don't send it to anybody else. And I'm not trying to contain your information. I'm soliciting help. But what I'm saying is, if somebody knows the history of Admiral McRaven, I'd like to get updated. So I see General Dunford and I see General Mattis, and we all agree that Kelly's not in the picture. And I sure don't envy these guys. I'm really glad that when I was 27 years old, I woke up and smelled the coffee and got out of the military. And would I, if I had the chance to do things differently, would I still go ahead and do what I've done the last 11 and a half years? I think the answer is yes. And let me see, Denise has just sent me something. Let me see if it's something. Okay, never mind. That's an older message. So anyway, you're back, and I hope you're feeling better and you're ready to take over. I'm trying to get someone to educate me on the significance of this picture, but As far as I think right now, and I tried to make contact with a person whose position and his understanding is such that I would have benefited from talking to him before the radio show. Uh, I think what we're seeing with President Trump is a master, and you even said yourself about an hour and 20 minutes ago, David, that he might be a master chaff spewer, and I think he is. I think he's absolutely destroying the weak minds that are proliferate in both the media and the shadow government. And I get so sick of saying deep state and shadow government. I think we all ought to just agree that it's a lot easier to say Christine Marcy because you take her out and the whole thing falls. I think you don't have to take out everybody who's bad. There's two or three bad ones. You take them out, the rest of the people are going to probably self-eliminate. I understand that people are self-eliminating from the senior executive service right now. And I want to point out that I did post the YouTube probably an hour ago. So somewhere in here, there's a YouTube that pretty much states that SES and Serco are the biggest enemies of the United States of America. And that makes me feel real good, David, because I'm quite certain that you and I are the source of anybody looking at SES and Serco now. They got the start from us. Would you agree, David?
Oh yeah, totally. And if we add in Con Air with its million cons and former cons as a mobile facility to generate SWAT teams to go into a crime scene before the crime is committed, set up the script for how things should come down, spoliate the crime scene afterwards, and be back in jail with a nearly perfect alibi. I mean, your sister has obviously got some pretty good resources. But I'd just like to talk about the Syria chemical attack, right? And so about 1,500 tons of Syrian chemical munitions were destroyed on a United States ship under the supervision of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. And anyone who wants to Google Senior Executive Service and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, apparently, if you're a member of the Senior Executive Service and you get parachuted into the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, you get your own office, and in that office is a gold fringed flag. Now, that seems kind of curious. That means on that ship, I forget the name of it, maybe someone could find it, where they destroyed 1,500 tons of Syrian chemical munitions from whatever source. I mean, who knows where they came from? Maybe some were manufactured, but some were smuggled in. Effectively, you got a ship with perhaps an office for senior executive service members working in the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which would have overseen and had custody of the destruction of chemical munitions from Syria. So all you need to do is to take a certain proportion or elements of that stockpile and provide it to a Con Air SWAT team directed by Christine Marcy or her former colleagues at the United States Justice, Imprisonment and Alien Transportation System, and stage what would be a man-in-the-middle attack on the people of Syria and present that attack to the trigger-happy, Twitter-fingered Donald Trump, or the Twitter-happy trigger fingers of Donald Trump, and try and trick him into launching World War III. So our argument, I think, Field, is to the Marine Corps generals, you better get off your ass, right? Because things are going to be happening extremely quickly. And when you have, dare I say, amateurs with their fingers on the trigger, things can go horribly wrong, horribly quickly. And the Russians are not going to be pushed around, although I'm very confident that Vladimir Putin has come under the same kind of pressure from British intelligence as Donald Trump. And I'm thinking back, I think it was in 2004. Do you remember an attack on a school in a place called Belsan in Russia, Field? Over to you.
Yes, I do. And the answer is yes, I remember it. And that was a contrived deal, was it not?
Absolutely. And the people who shot up those children, pistol whipped them and killed a very significant number were ex-cons or people who were on parole. And now that would seem to me to be consistent with the objective of this invention, which is to track prisoners and place them in a kind of parole priority. So some prisoners with this system who are dangerous psychopathic pedophiles can be released to provide a hardcore of people who might be persuaded to go into the Belsen school and shoot up and rape some children. Now, I don't know how courageous. It's really not a question of courage, is it? Because the president of the Russian Federation is a human being, and if someone has taken children and teachers in custody in school and is threatening to kill them, you're really not trained how to handle that. And probably the local army or special services that went in to help those children escape, they aren't trained. In fact, no training is really appropriate. So you have to go up the food chain and find out who is assembling the special weapons and tactics team that can be opportunistically used in a hit by paying the inventor, the assignee, or the patentee for the right to use his patent. So it would appear that Mr. Detling had a whole number of patented devices where he didn't have the technology to invent it. Some of them, I think, were named by UTC Corporation, United Technology Corporation, and Detling, but they were used in the Unabomber campaign. And that's how Mr. Detling was able to maintain his luxurious lifestyle. So I think, just back to summarize, I think this non-military briefing from Abel Danger can go out on the airwaves field. And we're telling people that they have to strip Serco, Conair, and the Senior Executive Service out of any contract with the United States government and transfer key technology, which is this Boeing asymmetric encryption system, to the Marine Corps intelligence activity. And I'm like you, Phil. I think it's oxymoronic, if that's the right term, to have 18 intelligence agencies in the United States. No other country in the world has that number, and what you inevitably create is confusion and empire building, and people get extremely suspicious of itself. So whatever intelligence Trump is getting, he's not equipped to sort out the different contributions from 18 quasi-independent intelligence agencies. So I think Boeing's encryption for asymmetric data links, which allows you to route header information through selected devices or systems, such as Bombardier combat support aircraft on 911, into the plane that needs to be flown into the building, then that should go to probably the most reliable and patriotic intelligence agency in the United States, because all the others have been discredited. So that's a very basic reason why the Marine Corps intelligence activity has to be stripped of any Serco involvement. So there we are, strip Serco, Conair, and the Senior Executive Service out of the United States government, and hand over the most powerful command and control facility, which is Boeing's encryption for asymmetric data links, to the Marine Corps intelligence activity. And in 24 hours, I think a new day would dawn in the United States of America. And as far as I'm concerned, as a friend of you and American, I think Abel Danger will have, I think there's a Marine Corps in that Con Air film. The actor says, he's asked, what are you going to do? And he says, I'm going to save the day. Do you think we can save the day, Phil? Over to you.
Well, I think we've tried, and I don't, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what my next few days hold. I don't have a lot of those answers. I'm very discouraged at what I've seen my country become, and it's even more discouraging to see uh, that my own sister, uh, it's, to have a family member being one of the greatest enemies of the United States of America isn't something that pleases me, but I think that you and I think we've done everything we could possibly think of to do to try to communicate openly to President Trump and the Marine generals, what some of the issues are. And once again, I'll go back to saying it's troubling to me to know that on July 29th of 2015, I sent him a letter. It's all over the internet. People can find it. It's been posted here in the chat rooms numerous times. But uh, Barry Swatero went to my high school, and almost 3 years ago now, I suggested to then candidate Trump that I'm really hoping that I was really hoping back then that he would become the nominee and that he would be elected. But even though there's going to be some people rolling their eyeballs at this, I'm going to say it again. I truly believe, whether I'm right or wrong, I truly believe that General Joseph Dunford is running the country today, and he has been the de facto president since no later than September of 2015. And it is the duty of the people that have taken an oath to serve and protect the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those oaths are not something that you can set aside. And I've taken those oaths numerous times. I've done everything I can possibly think of to try to get the message out. And I'm not sure where we stand. I'm still optimistic that Donald Trump, if he's not the most intelligent, in fact, let me close this with a question. Is there anybody in the chat room who knows if any prior president had an IQ higher than 154? I think that Donald Trump is masterful at what he's doing, but just as you said that he can distribute chaff, and you drew a parallel between him and someone else that can deliver chaff, it's the obligation of the people that are in a position of authority to protect the United States of America and make sure that our enlisted forces are not put into harm's way just to satisfy people like Henry Kissinger and the global bankers. I've seen today twice the suggestion that Donald Trump would like to bring U.S. troops home. I sure hope that's true. The United States of America has a Department of Defense. We need to defend ourselves. We don't need to be the global bullies for a bunch of bankers who, they pit people against each other, and they don't give a rat's ass who wins the war as long as everybody buys very expensive machinery to kill and depopulate with. I'm fed up with it. Am I optimistic? Yeah, as bad as I feel today, and it's funny how you can hit new lows, but I hit one today, and I'm sure I'll be better tomorrow, and I'm sure I'll be talking to Denise within 15 minutes of our going quiet here, David. But I don't want to sound like a whiner. I don't want to sound like a victim. I don't think I will be a victim, but I do have some powerful people deployed against me, and they're a bunch of cowards. For example, as far as Denise being kept out of the United States of America, if the FBI at one point stopped a former spouse on Highway 10 to ask her about me, if the customs people delayed Denise 3 times on 3 successive trips, asking her questions about me, why don't these guys just grow some nuts and come talk to me? Yeah, I'm pretty good at answering questions. Let's go ahead. You ask me a question right now I can't anticipate, David. Any question at all?
How are we going to win?
We're going to win by praying to God that He manifest His ordaining through the people that are willing to serve Him and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Because this battle is the battle of Ephesians, and the battle of Ephesians will be won by God. And God is, when you consider He's got all the power in the world, He's still humble enough where He likes to share credit by making some people look like they had a part to play in the victory. But Proverbs 21:31 says, victory rests on the Lord. And yes, we have made the horse ready for the day of battle. I think we're in the battle right now. I'm just seeing a picture pop up with Pence and a couple of other people. And it's from Braveheart. It says, this is easy, bring me more shit to fix. I do think that, and I'm going to be stunned if my confidence in Trump is not well placed. But I'll tell you, just like you often say, David, it would sure be nice to see some major moves. What would be a major move? Well, I know about a month ago, 4 people were taken out of a federal court in Los Angeles. And they were taken to March Air Force Base, and they were put on a plane, and these guys were hooded, and they were wearing Kevlar, whatever you call it, body armor, and they had helmets. And so there's some pretty heavy-duty defendants that were taken into custody over a month ago, and we don't know who they are yet. Trump loves the United States of America. I have no doubt in that. He also doesn't like the fact, in fact, one of his first acts when he became president was he had some people drop in on the Center for Disease Control because he wanted to find out if his own son Barron had been damaged by vaccines. And I think I'm correct in saying that young Barron has suffered some ill effects of some of these medicines that are crammed down the throat of every American child. And it's genocide, and genocide is a college boy term for murder. Well, I need to apologize to everybody if I fall short of what it is you think I'm supposed to be doing. But I've really done everything that I can think of to try to communicate in writing and in speaking what the dangers are to the United States of America, who needs to be taken out really quickly. And those people that need to be taken out really quickly includes George H.W. Bush, Barry Soetoro, and my sister, Christine Marcy. You take those 3 people out, you're going to see everybody else, including that short little guy from Phoenix. They're going to whip into shape because they know that they could be next. The list of Adrian Messenger had 17 people that needed to be dealt with. And I am I know I'm starting to sound discouraged or despondent. I am discouraged. I'm not despondent. I want to thank Kathy for this lovely hat. I hope I earn it. But Donald Trump is he's skilled in communications in a way that most of us can't understand, including me. David, so I'm going to take something from my throat right now.
Okay, Phil, shall I?
Yeah, go ahead. You talk about something and I'll be here, and then at some point we'll call this a day.
Right, okay. Well, actually, while you were talking, Phil, I think I made a decision. I had a good interview with Jason Goodman. It's almost embarrassing what he thinks my IQ is, and I said, how can I survive an introduction like that? And I noticed Scobanks very kindly says, as for the hawk, the charts, I think that's IQ haven't been made. So if I sit on my own shoulder, and I'm not patting myself on the back, of course that's a mixed metaphor, I say, yeah, David Hawkins, he's a fairly bright guy. But that's not the problem at hand. There's lots of bright people around it. It's the issue of communication. So before the show field, I said to Jason Goodman, normally you give me 3 hours and I can be on your show, right? And it's really just a parallel means by which Abel Danger can communicate the kind of things that we've been talking about today to his audience. And I think Jason Goodman is under pressure. My understanding, he's been accused of pedophilia by the guys at AIM, and I don't want to enter into those kind of things. All I know is that he's a good communicator, and when he and I got a show, he's very quick to be able to dive into the internet and bring up an image which illuminates some of my more opaque pronouncements, if that's the right term. So he's a very good facility for us, and I'm just airing. I'm sort of shooting the breeze here. I'm thinking that maybe he can come closer to Abel Danger and help us on a regular basis, an ad hoc basis. I think I did teach you ad hoc, didn't I, Phil?
Yes, it was the 8th of August of 2007. We were talking about Mitt Romney's mantle pants, Bill Clinton's voodoo underwear, where a witch doctor told him if he didn't change his, I don't even like talking about this stuff. You know, like people think I like what I do. That's simply not true. I'm so discouraged at the stuff we've been dealing with for a long, long time. In fact, I see Agent Bugs was wondering if I'm doing poorly. No, I'm just a little shell-shocked and battle-worn, but the sun will come up tomorrow. And sooner or later, you know, this country of mine is going to be destroyed or it's going to be saved. And if the country is destroyed, you know, I'll be destroyed with it. I don't think the country is going to be destroyed. But David, yeah, we could all use a little bit of levity. But you know, I think that I've told people, you know, I want to focus on what you and Jason were talking about, and Gobsmack's talking about your IQ. I think the highest clinically measured IQ in history, and I want to be corrected by the chat room by anybody who knows that I'm misspeaking, if I am misspeaking. I believe it's Maria von Sant, if that's her name. I think she got measured at 260. And so for some reason, years ago, I heard she had a 260. And 260 is the highest I've ever heard of for an IQ. And I've told people many times, and you know me, David, I wouldn't kiss your ass even if you took a shower. And I know you save water by showering once a fortnight. But you have the highest IQ of anybody I've ever encountered. And I used to say that about my sister. I phrased it differently, and I was wrong. But I used to say my sister was the smartest person I ever knew that was functional. But my sister isn't functional, and she's nowhere near as intelligent as you, David. So I guess on a bright and honest and uplifting note, I will say thank God that you're sharing your IQ with this battle. It's not your battle, you know, to save the United States of America. But on the other hand, the United States of America is being targeted by all this evil in the world because they want to force upon us a new world order, and none of us anywhere in the world want their bullshit. And, you know, there's going to be people that probably die trying. Who knows? But I'm not shy about stating I'm not always right. In fact, I love to be corrected. I want to be corrected right now. Carter, 153. Okay, well, he's 1 point under. Somebody said 157 for Gobsmack. Well, it wouldn't surprise me a bit because I know Gobsmack, and you know I can't understand him because of a Scottish accent. But if he emails me, I understand him correctly, and I have met him. And in fact, Gobsmack and I and Denise and Bugs and Live P and Afterburner, a bunch of us were together at AV8 last year and had a good time. And unfortunately, on March 9th of this year, a man who was very ill last year, his name was Lance Dangerfield. Now, David, I don't know what Lance's real name was, but he had so much love and respect for Abel Danger that he referred to himself as Lance Dangerfield. And, you know, bless his heart, he sure brightened a few of my days. And now his days are over. And another reason I'm talking directly now to Agent Bugs, who lives up in North Yorkshire. She had some reason to wonder if I was doing poorly. No, my physical health is fine, I think. David Smith down in Miami doesn't think my physical health is much. And that he called me. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant phone calls before I got out of my house this morning. And the cumulative effect of those was not good. But anyway, I always like to try to find some brightness in the darkness. And, David, you and I have been called to do this, and we never should have met. I shouldn't have met you, and you shouldn't have met me, just like I never should have met Denise. But I'll tell you one thing right now, and if these were to be my final words, that's how important that they are to me, that I need to express this. If it was not for Denise, I am confident I would not be here. The battle has just, it's been almost too much, keywords almost, and don't think I'm quitting, David. I'm not. I'm just discouraged. I'm tired. I do think that Trump's going to win. Are all three of those generals on his side? I don't know. But, we found out what the truth was with Rex Tillerson. We know the truth about that guy that used to be the banker for Rothschilds. What is his name? Wilbur Ross.
Wilbur Ross.
Yeah, I think he's got to go. I'm not so sure about Pence, but I do have great confidence in Donald Trump. And whether I'm right or wrong, and none of us are right all the time, I very well may be wrong. I truly believe Donald Trump is called to do what he's doing. I think he's happy to serve America in this way. And I get so tired of people that always want to say something about politicians. Donald Trump is not a politician, period. The whole problem with the United States of America is politicians and attorneys and bankers and judges. And a lot of those people in those groups, they may think they've had a pretty nice slice of life, but they don't know what awaits them for eternity. And I do. I know what awaits them, because it's either in Hebrews 10:36, which I'm going to look up immediately, David. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to hold myself accountable. I think it's written in Hebrews 10:36 of what happens to the enemies of God, and that's sort of a vague term. Well, no, not really. Anybody who harms a child is an enemy of God, and God doesn't lose. Never once has he lost, and he's not going to start. I don't think he's going to let America be lost. And conversely, if I'm wrong and God's going to let America be lost, I do not want to be around to see it. David, over to you.
Great, Phil, and it's very heartfelt. And you see, your sister might be intelligent, and I might be intelligent at a technical level, but there's another concept called emotional intelligence, and for me, that means empathizing with anyone out there, including your friends and your enemies. And I can fool myself, perhaps, into thinking that I understand your sister's mentality better than she does. And I understand her weaknesses, and she's got a lot of weaknesses. She has some formidable resources, but she doesn't know it, but she's already lost, because when you look at the body of work we've done, she's made one fatal mistake. Really, she had no alternative. She hasn't responded for 10 years. We've said everything about her that normally, if it wasn't true, she would sue you and me for libel, or quite possibly dispatch one of her Con Air SWAT teams. But she hasn't. She's paralyzed, right? And there's a lot going on which are decoy maneuvers. And I think I'm switching between wondering, as I said earlier, whether Trump is a trigger-happy Twitter man or a Twitter-happy trigger man. But you know what? From the enemy's point of view, it's very important to keep them guessing. So they don't know whether Trump is going to unleash a rain of missiles onto Syria and Russian targets in Syria. So that's a very good way of starting. Well, it could be a good way of starting World War III if someone makes a mistake. Equally, it's a very good way of flushing out your enemies who start to panic and look for their friends. And you see, the enemies don't have very good friends. They have people who are scared of them, who have been bought by them, right? Who have been influenced by them, but they don't have a good team of friends. Now, I think Abel Danger has an extraordinary team of friends. So when I listened to your interview with Douglas on AIM, there were a number of things that concerned me, Field, and I think I might have mentioned it. First of all, it appears that Douglas is not using his own name.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. In fact, let's just, for the benefit of our listeners, let's have an unscripted conversation about Douglas and my interview and Jason and your interview. And before we do that, I owe Jason an apology. He does not understand how busy I've been the last 72 hours. And I tell you, we are going to end on a bright note because I just said, and everybody heard me, I said, the enemies of God don't know what awaits them. And I said, I think it's written in Hebrews 10:36. See my smile? I was wrong. It's written in Hebrews 10:26. But I'm going to read you. There's a reason why God does this. He put the wrong scripture in my head because God himself, and this is where people that don't understand God are going to roll their eyeballs. God himself knew that I was suffering today, and I am. But God himself knew he could direct my attention to the wrong scripture and that I would be strengthened with his words. And I'm going to hold that. I've got my blue place marker right here. I'm going to read that as towards the end of this show, which should be coming along soon. But David, go ahead and you tell me what you think about both Jason and Douglas, and then I'll tell you honestly what I think. But I'm going to finish it up because I will hold myself accountable to David and Denise to send an email to Jason probably after I talk to Denise because she is the most important person in my life today. I want to say I've got a 24-year-old daughter that's 2 days past her due date. And so I'm, paying attention to that. I did talk to my little girl and she's got a doctor appointment tomorrow and she's going to ask the OBGYN to induce her. And I don't understand a lot of stuff. And I know David thinks I'm worldly. I wish he'd stop that. I'm not. I'm just more worldly than he is. That's all. But I don't like the world. That's why I'm always digging into this and sharing this with you. And, David, just let's talk about Douglas. And your point was well taken. I don't know why people don't use their real names if they're going to be, but I don't hold that against them. I mean, I enjoyed my time with him. To be honest and to be critical, I thought he was a little bit over and above on the profusion of gracious remarks to me. I don't necessarily like gracious remarks because I know what I am, I know what I'm not, and he was making me sound like something much better than what I am. All I am is somebody that God could have thrown into the dustbin of life, but he didn't do it, so here I am. So David, let's see what we can do to figure out. I feel bad that Douglas and Jason have had their on-air tiff. I think
but that's very revealing, Phil.
Okay, well, tell me what it means, honestly.
Okay, let me go back to Douglas. And I was listening to the show, and I think he was a little profuse. And, of course, that might be an attempt to butter you up because we're all a little bit of ego. But it's not easy to butter you up. Actually, that conjures into mind visual images that I really don't want to go with. But going back to Douglas, it does appear that Douglas and Betsy, how shall I put it, are being fed with a lot of information that is true of the senior executive service. And there's and there's this odd term, the conclave, which I think that's a sort of, Jesuit terminology about the bishops that determine who's going to be the next pope. Anyway, it's a funny kind of word that I don't like for whatever reason, something instinctively that makes me concerned about him getting information from the conclave when I don't know who the hell the conclave is. But that's by the by. So he's put together a list, or alleged list, in this plum book. He's stripped out the tripwires, and he now allegedly has a complete list of people who are or were, well, actually, if you join the SES, you're a member for life. I'm very confident of that, particularly if you take some oath of loyalty to the SES. So then it suddenly struck me, wouldn't it be interesting if there's a phrase I think in intelligence called, I will defeat your revolution by leading it. If the public at large starts to think that Douglas and Betsy, whatever their real names are, has got the access to the list of the members of the senior executive service, and then they insert someone who's not a member of the SES, that would discredit people like ourselves who are going after the SES. Let's say Douglas says that George Soros is a member of the SES, or Robert Mueller, or I don't know, the Queen of the United Kingdom and Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Suddenly this looks like disinformation, and if we're embracing his work on the SES, then we get discredited, we being Abel Danger. So I've tuned him out, right? Now, I heard about some kind of altercation between Goodman and Douglas, where Jason Goodman is accused of being a pedophile. Well, you know, that's a hell of a thing to say about someone. I mean, can I legitimately say, perhaps I have said that Christine Marcy is a pedophile? All I know is that she consorts with pedophiles. And if I've said that she's a pedophile, I don't know. I think you've told me that she went on tours of Romania with her lesbian girlfriend and would have been in a position to visit orphanages with young girls who are exceedingly vulnerable. If someone told me that she had not invented, but implemented the taser device and equipped lesbians in the United States Marshal Service, that would give them extraordinary power over women and their children who are awaiting or hoping to have a visa to live in the United States, or might get returned to Sierra Leone, where their children could be raped. So all I'm saying, I guess, is that Christine Marcy has unique and incredible powers. So what I was wondering about, after Douglas was very fulsome in his praise of you, why he hasn't called me. I think you said that to him that he could call me any time, but I have, and we have very different brains, you and I, Field, and I think it's very difficult to knock me off my path. And my path right now is to have the United States government strip Serco, Conair, and the Senior Executive Service out of any contracts with the United States. Right? It's very simple. Now, if I'm going to be quizzed by Douglas, he's going to ask me, presumably, which patents I think are particularly important, and I would I'd probably talk about this Conair patent or the Boeing encryption patent, which is a very technical language, which I'm pretty familiar with. I can handle the discussion and the debate on the merits of a particular patent and the potential misuse of that technology. There are not many people who can handle that. Jason Goodman is capable of doing it, and let me tell you the reply I sent to Jason. I said to Jason just before the show, Phil, I'm ready, provided I can get about 3 hours of notice. I can interview with you anytime. Here's his reply: David, I'm delighted to have you on anytime. When would you like to do the next one? That's a different kind of response to the absence of any kind of contact from Douglas, Phil. So my bottom line is, I'm going to talk to Jason anytime opportunistically when an event occurs. I will stay absolutely focused on the idea that they're using the patent office to identify and improvise devices that can be used to kill people. But those devices that are so used leave a signature at the crime scene, which people like Abel Danger can detect. And let me give you an example, Phil. The Redfield scope that was allegedly used by Mr. James E. Files to shoot Kennedy through the temple and knock that fragment of skull out of the back of his head would have given tremendous precision. So when James E. Files said that he used that device, I look at the precision of the attack, at least at the final shot, and I can match it up with a patented device. When little Valerie Percy, I don't know if she was little, the twin daughter of Charles Percy, was bludgeoned and stabbed to death in 1966, I think it was, maybe it was 68.
66.
66 in her parents' home, and her parent, or Charles Percy being the chairman, the former chairman of Bell and Howell, when the research director of Bell and Howell was George H. Peterson. So I do a little search and I find out that the Bell and Howell camera tripod, could be used in a manner not intended by Bell and Howell, because Bell and Howell intended to use it to hold up a camera, I don't know how heavy the camera is, and avoid shaking, right? So it's got sharp dagger-like feet, and it's got a triangular boss. And if you telescope the daggers into the legs of the tripod, it would make an extraordinarily effective weapon to create a triangular dent in Valerie Peirce's skull and deep puncture wounds in her breast and belly. And when the mother goes into the bedroom, she hears her child groaning because she's obviously dying and very severely injured. She gets a glimpse of a guy who shines a flashlight into the face. And then there's a police sketch of the suspect. And for me, and for Jason Goodman, it's a dead ringer. Now, the beauty of the conversation with James Goodman on that score is that he can instantly access the internet in ways that you and I have trouble with, and put up a picture of Peter G. Peterson at the age of about 26, and the suspect that was a police sketch as a result of the description given by Valerie Peirce's mother. So I think, when our morale is a little low or we're overworked, I think it will be highly invigorating to talk to Jason Goodman, and you can do it and I can do it. We can do it opportunistically. We don't have to coordinate. And then we can get his audience out there. And I'd like to see, not binding, that's the wrong word. We don't bind anyone. Jason Goodman becoming, because you and I, bless us both, we're amateurs in terms of production of TV or whatever, but I think Jason is a professional. So I would like to welcome Jason into the fold, and I'll talk with him afterwards and talk with you and Craig and Tim to see if that's acceptable to the team, and we extend our reach into Jason's community. Over to you, Phil.
Yeah, do you remember that comment about entangling alliances?
Yes.
Yeah, I just think that's something to keep in the back of both your mind and mine. But as far as this Jason Goodman versus AIM, I don't know the truth about either of these entities. I do know Jason has never tried to kiss my rear, and Jason probably thinks I'm avoiding him, which is not true. But I've been so incredibly busy since Monday because, as you recall, we did a show Monday. The day before Sunday, I did a no-notice show with AIM. But I hate to see people that allegedly are in the truth business infighting. I don't want to argue with anybody. I don't want to argue with AIM. I don't want to argue with Jason. I also owe Jason an apology because he tried to Skype me 3 different times on Monday. I think 1 or 2 of those were while you or I were on the radio. And then, as you know, Tuesday, Denise took me to the airport. And so I flew, it's been quite a week. I flew Tuesday for 8 hours or so. In fact, I know I sound negative or tired today, and I apologize for that. But actually, the trip back from London was probably the nicest trip I've ever had back from London. But having said that, it's still leaving Denise, who I didn't want to leave. But I had my uncle's funeral, and the lady who cares for my dogs while I'm not here was concerned about the health of one of my dogs. Now, I'd let the dog die 100 times before I'd take an hour away from Denise. But I did feel compelled to get back for my uncle's funeral, and so we've had his funeral. That's been taken care of. And now I think what might be therapeutic, David, is maybe you and I and Jason have a conference call, and we can make sure that there's no misunderstanding. I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to be sending, in fact, I'll do this even better. I will send an email to you and Denise and 2 people from the chat room, one of whom will be Gobsmack. The other one might be Braveheart. Doesn't matter. I'm not looking for volunteers. I'm just going to make sure that I hold myself accountable to communicating with Jason and letting him know I haven't been avoiding him. I just feel like if somebody wants to interview me, and I have the ability to be interviewed. In fact, I got somebody today I have to call up, And I'm not being evasive. I just can't remember who they are. I could check my emails. In fact, I will. But somebody, in fact, David, let me turn it over to you and let me check my emails because I'd like to run this name, whoever this is that's trying to interview me. I'd like to get, oh, there's some good news finally. Um, I think Denise Kinnerman's looking for, oh, I'm getting, anyway, I'm really touched. But let me just go, I want to find out who this is that's trying to interview me because surely someone in our chat room would be familiar with this party, and it's taken me a while. But David, before we get off, I do want to figure out with you how we can communicate, maybe a conference call with Jason. I want to assure him that I've enjoyed everything I've ever done with Jason, and but I don't want to be put in the position, okay, here we go. Pardon me for doing this, David, but there is a person out there called Tom Cat, and I'm sure that's not his real name, but he's with America Matters TV. Has anybody ever heard of America Matters TV? And I'm going back in the chat room, hoping somebody tells me. And I did see a couple of encouraging things when I was going through my emails. I saw, and well, it's not earth-shattering, but at this point, with the last 72 hours I've had, well, here's a good example. This white hat, I have no idea what this cost, but it's a Stetson hat. It's extremely well made, and I take it as a giant compliment from this Captain McKelly, Micale, that she thinks that I'm worthy of this hat. I'll try to live up to that. I don't think I'm worthy of it. But anyway, David, I do know that you and I have been doing this 11 years and a half. It has been discouraging at some points. I'm not discouraged by anything within the Abel Danger framework. That's not the source of my discouragement. It's just some other things that I guess when somebody wants to intentionally take on the most powerful people in the world and chew them up, spit them out, it could be that I get chewed up, spit out. But, God.
Never.
Well, God actually really did introduce us. You'll agree to that. And God really did ask me to expose evil. And I'm exposing it. And unfortunately, it cost some of my family members some things. So they might not understand me. They might be ashamed of me. I know that Denise respects me, and that means everything to me. But I'm going to close on a good note, because when you tell me it's time to close, I'm going to read to you not only what I thought I was going to find, but what God put on my plate. And for those of you who are just starting to take the first couple steps on your Christian journey, let me tell you that you want to hang around and listen to what I'm going to read, because I intentionally wanted to go to Hebrews 10:36, but I was wrong. It's Hebrews 10:26 is what I'm looking at. And when I read to you what God did to me, he ministered to me personally, and I'm going to share it with everybody so that you can see that God is willing to reach out to you when you feel as bad as I felt the last day or so. So, David, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So I see various comments about Jason and so on. I can tell anyone out there that there is no one going to deflect me. Now, distract me, I think Field is distractible. I'm distractible with various things that come on the horizon that suddenly switch my interest. But I'm not divertible. Like I say, I repeat, the goal, let's say the imputed goals of Abel Danger is to strip Serco, Conair, and the senior executive service out of any contracts with the United States government. There'll be a new world that will dawn after that. And it's really very easy. It's a stroke of a pen. Now, going back to Trump, when he got into office and he looked at the total mess in the stable, how to clean that up? First of all, he wouldn't have known who were the principals. He had to be briefed, presumably, about Christine Marcy and Serco and the SES. There's no excuse now for the Marine Corps generals around President Trump not to have briefed him. We briefed the public at large. And no one's going to tell me, or at least I hope they're not going to tell me, that the Marine Corps generals are less informed than the public at large. So, and here's a little boost field, and, well, I hope it's a boost. I sometimes feel sorry for the bad people, because Winston Churchill said something to the effect, he mobilized the English language and sent it into battle, which I think is an extraordinary comment. We've mobilized the truth. I love Webster's thought, I've coined or compounded a phrase, the franchise of truth, which I think we can apply to this series of movies that could be crowdsourced and community-based for crimes that, let's say, stretch back to Christopher Marlowe in 1593, when he was killed by being stabbed, I think, by a cordwainer's awl in the eye in the pub. And Christopher Marlowe is a very interesting character with a lot of his writings is totally appropriate to the present time, including the mystery or whatever it is of Dr. Faustus, who sold his soul to the devil. And Dr. Faustus got great power and great wealth, but eventually the devil came to take him away. I see no difference between the episodes or the motives for the murder of Christopher Marlowe and the kind of murders that are taking place today under the auspices of Serco, Con Air, and the Senior Executive Service. So there's a delicious kind of continuity field, and we will not be moved. That is it. Able Danger is a franchise for the truth. It's got an extraordinary upside to it, very little downside. I mean, we can be taken out, but the idea has been cast upon the oceans, and the ripples will travel around the world and back 3 times before breakfast on the internet. So I'm very optimistic. You're an extraordinary guy. There's no reason, well, you have personal reasons, no doubt, under pressure, just as I have. But we've unleashed a tiger, if that's the right word. Over to you.
Okay. Well, do you mind if I just read what I intended? I was talking about the enemies of God, and I thought it was Hebrews 10:36. It's not. It's Hebrews 10:26. Do you mind if I read that? And then what's more important is I'm going to read what I found when I went to the wrong place. But to do this in order, I was talking about these people that are enemies of God. And anybody who's ever harmed a child or done anything of a pedophile nature, numerous people have already put up Matthew 18:5 and 6. But let me just read this. This is where I wanted to go, but this isn't where I ended up. I wanted to read Hebrews 10:26. It says, if we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume the enemies of God. The enemies of God include my sister. The enemies of God include George H.W. Bush. And if somebody wants to get upset because I just said that, that's on them. That's not on me, because God asked me to do exactly what I'm doing, which is expose evil. But I just want to show you what a loving and kind God He is, because in whatever my situation is today, instead of remembering 10:26, what I just read, I went looking for 10:36, also in the book of Hebrews. And it says this. I'm going to say it as slowly as I can, and I hope I don't fall apart. It says, so do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised. For in just a little while, He who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and if he shrinks back, I will not be pleased with him. But we are not those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who believe and are saved. And, if people want to look that up, by the way, it's Hebrews 10:35 to 39. And just put yourself in my position where I feel tired and discouraged, and yet I accidentally found those words. And, I thank God for having me make that mistake and go find what He wanted me to find instead of what I wanted to find. So I didn't mean to get up on a podium, but I guess I sort of did. But it's important to know, with the passing of my uncle and with the passing of this Lance Dangerfield, and I got an email here just a couple minutes ago from Denise. Apparently, whatever, I don't know what in fact killed him. He wasn't healthy the last couple times I saw him, but apparently he got a pretty big tumor on his face, and he died on March 9th. Now, was he anything special? No, neither am I, neither is David. God's created all of us to do certain things. And I sort of would have been very happy if God just let me fly airplanes, but that wasn't what he wanted to do. And so he changed my direction, and he knows what he's doing, so I don't have to know. I just have to trust and obey. David, over to you.
Yeah, well, Phil, you've smashed the doors down, and we've ushered in the truth. And I sometimes almost feel sorry for the enemy. Like I said, I think they've lost. They don't know it yet. So I'm very optimistic. And as far as Jason Goodman's concerned, he's not going to divert me from my path. However, I believe I can help him focus on what our strategic objectives are. And he has the communication capability and the technical capability to communicate probably better than I can. What is it? Who was the great inventor? Edison. I think he said invention is 90% imagination. Sorry, 10% imagination and 90% perspiration. It's incredibly hard for me to communicate successfully on what I think has been solved imaginatively. So someone like yourself and someone like Jason and the other members of the Abel Danger team, we have become an extraordinary communication vehicle for some really, I think, quite profound perceptions on crime scene investigation. So I will call Jason and arrange for an interview field, and we can look for an opportunity to have the three of us on the show and make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Actually, correction, we're always opportunistic, but we can reassure ourselves that everyone has the same objectives. Is that fair enough? Over to you.
Yeah, you do the thinking. I'll just say yes. But anyway, it's 3:07, and that's 9:07 where Denise is, and I know she was up in the middle of the night. Let's see. He cut it out at AV8. I wonder what that. Oh, yuck! I don't want to hear about that. Apparently, he's. Oh gosh. Yeah, there's some real tough things in the world, and I'm happy for Lance Dangerfield that his battles are over, and he gave me and Denise. But in fact, to honor him, David, bear with me. I've got to go pick something up and show. I found it already, so you won't have to bear with me long. But as far as this man, Lance Dangerfield, who just died, it's real easy for me to say nice things or say, things which some people could question, but you can't question this. What I'm showing the camera is a Bible. It's a huge Bible. It probably weighs 25 pounds, I'm guessing. It was presented to Catherine Mary Skilton by her affectionate father on her 5th birthday, the 17th day of August of 1873. This is a family Bible that's no longer with the family because Lance, he knew that I sort of like Bibles, and he gave me 2 of these historic. And I don't know where the other one is right now, but in this room, which is very messy, there's another Bible from the 1800s, and Lance gave them both to me. So I'm glad for Lance that his suffering is over. And if somebody wants to get moved to tears, I know a song that'll do it, and I think it's called American Trilogy by Elvis, and in that song, there's a picture of Lance. Griffey will just put it up. Lance is the guy on the left, camera left of Afterburner. She's the blonde lady between the 2 guys with beards. The guy with sunglasses is Lance. The guy without glasses is Gobsmack. But, and there's another picture of Lance with, there's a lot of pictures of Lance. So isn't it nice that Lance is getting some kind thoughts going his way wherever he is, and I know where, I'm pretty sure he is. But David, it's really tough to get through this, But in that American trilogy, oh, somebody just put it up, I think. You watch for this line in there. He says, "So hush, little baby, don't you cry. You know your daddy's bound to die. But all my trials, Lord, soon will be over." Yeah, that's what awaits us. And Lance is gone, my uncle's gone, and who knows who's next. But I'm not going anywhere until I see Denise again. And I'd just as soon spend the rest of my life in Northern Ireland or in Wales or in Denise's flat, because I can do what I do and what David and I can do this from anywhere in the world. But after 16 months of having my own sister and the customs people separate Denise and I'm not really too pleased about that. David, over to you.
Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? So, and vengeance is a dish best served cold. So I want to end on a positive note, Field.
Good.
I think the enemy, it's an extraordinary vulnerable position because it doesn't know it's lost.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of timing and good communications. And so after the show, like I say, I'll talk to Jason Goodman and give him some of the elements of what discussed today. And then you'll be talking to him direct, I expect. And we can have an interview with myself on current events in Syria, because it's an extremely dangerous thing. It's going to happen very quickly. And then we can have a threesome at our collective convenience. So over to you, Field, and best wishes to all of the Able Danger team. Regrets about the passing of our friends, and over and out.
Okay, does that mean you're done?
Yeah.
Okay, so am I going to get rid of you or are you going to get rid of me? Huh. Okay, let's see if I can get through this Elvis song. And I do it at the end because that way it can be cut so there's no trademark or whatever you call it. Gobsmack and Braveheart both sent it, which is interesting because they're the two guys that are going to be copied to the email I send.
Oh, I wish I was in the land of Africa. Oh, that I would not forgotten.
Look away, look away, look away. Dixieland.
Dixieland.
Sing it, fellas.
Sing it, fellas. Oh, I wish I was in Dixie.
Away. That's the Stamps Quartet. In Dixieland, I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. What do you call it? Gobsmack and Braveheart both sent it, which is interesting because they're the two guys that are going to be copied to the email I send.
Oh, I wish I was in the land of Africa. Oh, that I would not forgotten.
Look away, look away, look away. Dixieland.
Dixieland.
Sing it, fellas.
Sing it, fellas. Oh, I wish I was in Dixie.
Away. That's the Stamps Quartet. In Dixieland, I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. For Dixieland, my heart was born. Heard it all from those people. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Now he's going to sing Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Then the trademark. Glory, glory, hallelujah. seen it once, you've seen it 100 times, it's always the same. His truth is marching on. Now here comes the sad part. Hope I do okay. I'll take my white hat off just in case. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. You know we're bound to die. When all my trials go, soon will be over. He sang this in '73, and then his battles were over 4 years later. You know what? I think I'm going to fade it, even though that's not the end of the song, and I'll tell you why. Because that's the part I wanted people to hear. There we go. Okay, I think I got the big red button a while back. If somebody has put up the protocol,